Again, thanks for coming along to this wee event. We have got with us tonight, so we've got Sarah who's joining us. That's our policy and PR pharmacist who's been with us since the start of December. Has put a whole load of work into this, which she'll talk you through on the other end. We've got Robbie doing kind of IT support, watching for hands. And we've got Amanda and Michael keeping an eye on chat for us this evening. So plenty of support and hopefully this will be an informative one for you. So by the end of the session, what we're looking for is for you guys to have a better understanding of the consultation that's out, a better understanding of what CPS's position is on that and what our consultation response is going to look like, and a wee bit about what you can actually do if you agree with us that there needs to be a bit more done. It could go a wee bit further. So a bit of background first. I think in general, many of you will understand and agree that the pharmacy as a profession is very much over-regulated. Loads and loads of very detailed laws around our profession, which is quite unusual. Usually primary legislation is quite low detail, and then you get the other layers of regulation when it comes to professions coming in to give you a bit more detail around about the rules, but it can be quite flexible. So when we've got primary legislation that overall tells you what can and can't be done at a very high level. You've then got regulations, so in our case the GPHC, and they can set rules, regulations, and provide guidance as well. Then you've got your professional guidance, which would be in our case the RPS, and when they put out professional guidance, it is pretty well respected, and it is used in things like legal cases and whatnot. They will refer to professional guidance. Then you've got standards that are put out there and professional guidance, and then you've got local governance policies and procedures as well. So a whole load between patients and the public and potential harm. In our case in pharmacy, it's very, very top heavy in terms of governance, so there's loads and loads and loads of different legislation and regulations that apply to us, which might perhaps explain a little bit towards explaining. Sound there, thanks, Robbie. Which goes a wee bit towards explaining why some of us end up so black and white as pharmacists, because there is so much of the you can and you can't at such a high level. So, I mean, that's been recognised for a long time now, and there's been a programme of work going on called the Rebalancing Medicines Legislation Programme, very much a UK piece with UK-wide representation from pharmacy bodies and professionals, lawyers, leaders from all sectors and all through the profession. Huge amount of expertise there. And that has been looking over the years to make changes to move some of what is in primary legislation that's very inflexible. There's very little opportunity to change it. The opportunity doesn't come up very often, into regulation. So pretty much passing more and more power over to the GPHC, which allows them to set regulations and be much more flexible. It allows them to do things like tests of change. It allows them to react to changes in the market. So if you look just now, it's primary legislation that dictates what can and can't happen when it comes to locker boxes that a number of businesses have actually invested in, and we have to use all sorts of crazy loopholes to make them exist and do our best for patients and bring on technology because the primary legislation is so inflexible. So things like this are what leads this rebalancing programme to have a look and say, right, okay, what is it that actually needs to change? What is it we need to transfer over to the GPHC and have them effectively set the rules for the profession? So over the last few years, we've had things like the GPHC have been given the power to set the rules around about the responsible pharmacist regulations, which they'll consult on in the coming sort of years. Superintendent pharmacists and chief pharmacists, the consultation of which is out right now. They've also taken out of primary legislation or inserted into primary legislation the ability to have a defence against an inadvertent dispensing error, which you'll have seen a good couple of years ago. Now, prior to that, it was technically by the letter of the law. If you made a mistake, even if it was just an honest mistake, then you were potentially liable criminally. And civilly, which is not ideal, clearly. So that's all been sorted, and this is the kind of tail end of this rebalancing programme now, looking at actually what is it we need to do around about supervision in the primary legislation to move things on and recognise that practice has absolutely shifted and doesn't look anything like it did all those kind of decades ago that this was all written. So it's all a good thing. Excuse me. So government are very much looking at their own laws. What is it we do around about supervision? What's already out there? And as a reminder, in terms of supervision, to kind of break it down as simply as possible, that's the parts of the law that prevent the day-to-day business as usual happening if there isn't a pharmacist on premises supervising and overlooking what is going on. And I think again there to kind of show you how some of the legislation and guidance works. The legislation very much says all these activities like the assembly of medicines, the dispensing of medicines, the handing over of medicines, all of this needs to be done under the supervision of a pharmacist. And it doesn't go into much more detail than that, but it's where our professional guidance comes in and says, well, actually supervision does mean the pharmacist has to be there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are creamed over every single interaction that's going on, because clearly that would be outrageous and impossible. So what we are looking at though is there's some key things that when this rebalancing programme looked at practice and went, okay, well, some of this is already happening and it technically shouldn't be, or we could be freeing up people to work in different ways. And the two main ones that stood out are around about when the pharmacist isn't actually on premises or is effectively uninterruptible for extended periods of time. So you guys will be more than aware that we've got increasingly clinical services that will have you away in the consultation room for a good amount of time, potentially actually out of the premises, interacting with other healthcare professionals, and your teams are very, very well trained and could carry on with some of the business, but they're technically not allowed to in terms of assembly preparation, and particularly as you're aware, the moment the pharmacist walks out the building, you can't be transferring over any prescription medications, even if they've already been completely checked, which is nuts, particularly because we now have locker boxes that are able to do that 24/7. So overall, that they are looking at all of this. Now, we knew that this consultation was coming, and we've known that for quite some time. We did think, we'll go into a bit of the detail what the consultation actually puts forward as a proposal. We did, to be fair, perhaps naively, believe that the consultation was going to come out as a quite open thing to say, what do you all think should be the changes? And with that in mind, Amanda led some work with our board and council starting in probably about autumn 22, finishing in the middle of 23, where we very much looked at it from the ground up with our elected or your elected members that represent you to say, right, okay, what would we be comfortable with? What would we be happy with? What would we want to see? Because we know the way that the services are heading. So what is the actual, what are the rules going to have to look like to allow us to work flexibly and get the most out of our workforce, and actually trust our workforce because we know that they're well trained. So we looked at that, and effectively what we did over the course of that, several sort of meetings and workshops, we looked to categorise all the activities that went on in a pharmacy according to the level of supervision that people would be comfortable with, and there was definitely some debate, some difference of opinion, which is all very healthy and very welcomed. And after all that kind of work, we got to an end point that sounds very simple, but did take quite a lot of work to get to. And before I kind of cover what the CPS position was before the consultation was launched and still is, it's probably fair to say, or it's important to say, that our position is very much one where the angle is, it's all about enabling. So if you have got your A team in, all amazingly well trained, it's the regular pharmacist that's on, it's the regular team, and you're absolutely flying, then you can work in these new and flexible ways, and that's grand. If you don't want to, or it's a day where that's not the case, then you don't have to. But let's not hold back people who are way ahead of the curve, would be our position. So what we got to as an organisation was that we were saying, right, straight off the bat, we actually need to address the elephant in the room, which is there's a lot of worry around supervision that this is the start of a slippery slope towards one pharmacist with 20 TV screens in front of them supervising 20 pharmacies remotely. what we are saying very clearly is that we are still in a position that there should be one responsible pharmacist to each one physical community pharmacy presence. It just makes sense. It is what owners want to see. It is what pharmacists are comfortable with. It's what the public are comfortable with. That's what we're used to, and not just what we're used to. That's what we envision as being the way forward, particularly because we are so invested in face-to-face clinical services. So we're absolutely clear on that. It's one pharmacist to one pharmacy. The next couple of points, though, that we'd come to were quite unanimously the position of our council and board. So first one being that the assembly of prescriptions, so the kind of technical pulling together, so accepting in prescriptions through to ordering, through to printing off labels, processing through PMR, putting the prescription together, everything pretty much except going through the gateway of the clinical check and the accuracy check to then be bagged. Actually, that assembly, if it's in a place where the processes and procedures are clear and the team are well trained, that doesn't actually require the supervision of a pharmacy professional at all. That said, there still needs to be governance around about it. So what we said is that actually we would propose that the superintendent pharmacist role, it gets made clear in the professional regulation by the GPHC that it's pharmacy superintendent owner level that are responsible for creating the conditions, i.e. the right SOPs, the right teams, the right technology support, all of that together. They're responsible for making sure that that's all in place to allow well-organised teams to carry on and do those activities without there being a pharmacist, because that's not where the risk necessarily lies. So that was one part. Another part was, I think, the part that the consultation actually, as you'll see in a wee bit, Sarah will cover, has got pretty much right, is that we have seen that we should be allowing the handout of prescriptions when an RP is logged in, but not necessarily their own premises, which gets over your kind of lunchtime issues, and also we're aware that there are setups in particularly in remote and rural areas where a pharmacist is trying to run two pharmacies to two communities that are underserved, and really kind of struggling with what happens when you move between one and the other. Really tricky situations there, and some workarounds in place that are kind of just saying, see if people are figuring out workarounds like your locker boxes being in deregistered parts of the premises, or we've got pharmacy owners deregistering parts of their premises so that handout can occur when the pharmacist isn't there because the pharmacist can't be there for part of the day. That's a sign that your system isn't right, rather than a sign of people kind of wriggling out of their obligations. It's all perfectly safe, and we need to make sure that the regulation or legislation catches up with what practice actually is. So that was our main position, in that we were one-to-one RP to pharmacy, allow assembly without an RP logged in, but making the superintendent and the pharmacy owner heads, and allowing the handout of already bagged up checked prescriptions when the RP is logged in, but not necessarily there. We also did have a proposal around about the responsible pharmacist absence. It's currently a maximum of 2 hours in any given 24-hour period. We're looking for a bit more flexibility about that, but that's actually a separate ask that'll get picked up when the GPHC consult on what the new responsible pharmacist regulations and standards should be. So that's not for this piece, that's not for this, what is a Department of Health and Social Care consultation. So then the consultation came out, and it did not appear precisely the way that we had hoped it would. It's actually putting forward proposals in a different way, in a very specific way, and I'll let Sarah probably pick up at this point. Sarah, are you okay to cover what the consultation is proposing to the profession?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Adam. So Adam's covered a lot there already, and hopefully that gives you the basis of what I'm about to talk about. But I'm going to begin with proposal 2, just because that one's slightly less clunky than proposal 1. So the proposal that came out was to enable a pharmacist to authorise any member of the pharmacy team to hand out checked and bagged prescriptions to patients or patient representatives. And this was to align with bricks and mortar pharmacy premises with current practices such as home delivery and locker boxes, as Adam said. So we fully support this. It's going to deliver significant operational benefit, as Adam said. It's always very frustrating if a pharmacist nips out on their lunch break and a patient comes in and you can't then hand out a prescription which is bagged, checked and waiting for the patient to come and collect it. So that's going to free up a lot of opportunity around that. But it's maintaining safe controls around the point of transfer by enabling the responsible pharmacist to decide on a case by case, day by day, even possibly prescription by prescription basis as to how that will be handled and handed out. So that was our stance on proposal 2. I'll move on to proposal 1 now, which, as I said, is slightly more clunky. So proposal 1 is to amend the Medicines Act and the Human Medicines Regulations to enable pharmacists, should they wish, to authorise a registered pharmacy technician to carry out or supervise another person to carry out the preparation, assembly, dispensing, sale and supply of prescription-only medicines and pharmacy medicines. Now, we fully support that the core aim is to free up pharmacists' time as more and more clinical services are heading in community pharmacies' direction. And we always want to make best use of the available skill mix within our teams. However, CPS feel that the mechanism proposed isn't enabling enough. So as Adam said, we don't feel that a pharmacist authorising another individual person is enabling enough for the preparation, assembly and dispensing of a prescription. That should be based more on robust, safe systems, because ultimately if a pharmacy technician is off for the day or changes job, then the system that you have set up, which is enabling clinical services to be delivered by the pharmacist and taken away from that dispensing activity, is going to then rely on that pharmacist again. So it's more around using safe, robust systems and harnessing technology and the skill set that we've got in pharmacies to be able to do that. So as Adam said, there's obviously going to be other consultations that come out soon with regards to superintendents and owners, and we're hoping that a lot of that will be clarified in that consultation as well. We also looked at the impact assessment, which shows that the benefits of proposal 1 are actually very limited, with only 29% of pharmacists able to benefit due to pharmacy technician workforce issues at the minute. These are highly likely to persist. And although 100% of Scottish pharmacies are already delivering a range of clinical interventions, with 20% offering independent prescribing services, which will rise to 100% by early 2030s. Every pharmacist will need to be decoupled, as I said, from this technical aspect of dispensing, preparation and assembly. And we want to make sure that this advancing practice holds and delivers that sustainable NHS model, and that is to allow the pharmacist time to be more freed up. We do agree that the sale and supply of pharmacy medicines should require the supervision, but not necessarily the physical presence of a registered professional. And we support the proposals as written for these elements of practice. So that's the proposals that we've gone over. Adam, do you want to chip in?
No, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I suppose in summary, we have looked at this, and whilst it takes us to a slightly better place than we are right now in terms of new and different ways of working, it just hasn't quite gone far enough. And if this were GPHC regulations and guidance that we were talking about, would maybe be okay with that, because it would allow the testing bit by bit of, okay, let's move it on a bit, let's push the boundaries. They could allow that and allow exceptions. This is still the primary legislation we're talking about, so they are effectively proposing that you're always going to have a minimum of one registered professional in and on, for us to be able to carry on the sort of nuts and bolts supply function, or at least the end of it, that's all the kind of assembly and pulling together of the medications, is just not flexible enough. We really don't think they've picked the right mechanism here. The authorisation thing is actually quite fascinating in terms of a way to go about things, and it works probably for the higher end. So you can imagine now it's not going to be long until pharmacy technicians are able to operate under PGD, which is fantastic. And actually then being able to do that shouldn't require the pharmacist to be around either. So that authorisation part is going to be key there. So that's why we're supporting the kind of sale and supply end of their proposals. But in terms of assembly, preparation, the things that your guys are incredibly well trained to do, that you've invested hugely in technology, whether it be scanning services, automation, your PMR systems, it's just quite short-sighted would be our view, and we are doing everything that we can to raise awareness of the issue, because I think we could quite easily sleepwalk into this and the proposals might just go through as written, which would, as I say, take us to a slightly better place than we are just now. But from speaking to members whilst we were building our response, and certainly even around the board table, we were talking to pharmacy owners that we had 1 pharmacy, 2 pharmacies, 10 pharmacies, 50 pharmacies, and what we were hearing back from people is this authorisation model. We do have pharmacy technicians where we would trust in a heartbeat, absolutely, to be able to do that, and that it may well work, but it's such a fragile operating model to rely on not only your pharmacist turning up for the day, but your pharmacy technician, and it actually being those two people that are comfortable with one another, are used to working with one another. It just isn't a robust system. Using authorisation, it's not something you can build a business on, and that was coming through loud and clear from our engagement with pharmacy owners. So that's where we landed on our response and our position on things. We have since done a good bit of engagement around about with different pharmacy organisations, with the press. Sarah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that before we move in maybe 5-10 towards questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yes, we have done quite an extensive communications plan around this, as we really want to try and get as much engagement as possible. Some of the activities we've taken part in have included talking to the pharmacy press and wider media outlets. We have also spoken to other organisations that obviously they will have their own consultation responses going in. So it's really to try and support collaborative working and make sure that our response with Community Pharmacy Scotland is heard. We have spoken to some of the other home nation representative bodies, and also trying to influence their understanding of our response and how our response would also apply to what their members are saying. We have done numerous website articles and CPS newsletters, and we've engaged quite extensively on social media, including Twitter, Instagram, all the usual platforms that you see. I have recorded a video with regards to the consultation, giving a bit of information around it, but also how to respond and where to access the consultation as well. So apologies if you have seen my face numerous times now, but that was again to try and increase engagement and understanding of what the consultation is about. We have also spoken to Chief Pharmaceutical Officer Alison Strath. Again, all of these sort of interactions that we're having are just trying to inform of our position, of CPS's position, and to engage as much conversation around the consultation as possible. So that's where we are sitting at the minute, and hopefully you found that informative when you've seen all the interactions that have been going on.
Sarah, and it's great having Sarah on board. This is exactly what brought Sarah into the business for, was doing that sort of external engagement around about matters that are important to us. And this was a fantastic first kind of case study. I think the consultation launched about 2 days into Sarah being in post. So baptism of fire, and she's done a grand job so far of supporting the sort of development of the CPS position and response, and then engaging with others to push it forward. So we're conscious that we need to give people a chance to ask questions. It's a very complex topic. I'm aware that we have been steeping in this, living in it for months. And in fact, if we go back to all the work that the CPS Board and Council have done a way back since 2022, so we are sure that not everybody is in that same position. Coming tonight may be the first you've had a chance to sit and actually have a think about it or a listen to it. So there might be things that are unclear, or perhaps you've got an alternative point of view, which we'd be delighted to hear. I think the key thing is we just want to see a real conversation and involvement around about this. Otherwise, it will just happen to us. And we know how much we don't like that when it happens, so that this is our chance to get a bit involved. So what we'll do is we'll take some questions now. So hands up and questions in the chat, and then once we've done that, when we kind of reach close to 8 o'clock, what we'll do is we'll wrap up, and we'll make sure that you guys have got everything you need to respond to the consultation yourselves. It is very straightforward to do, and the Department of Health and Social Care have actually limited your responses to 350 words for each question, so you actually can't spend that much time on it. I have got a question in the chat, so I'm going to take Torco first with a hand, and then Jonathan, I'll come to your question in the chat just after that. Torco.
Yes, hello. Thank you to you all for your work on this subject. I'll say straight away that I'm minded to disagree with your disagree on point one. Okay. But I might be persuadable. I feel that our pharmacy technicians, we've been training them in our organisation for more than 30 years, and they've been undervalued. It's not clear what their roles are. It's not clear that we can recruit people at a high enough level that they can really do their job well, which means paying them well. I mean, effectively, you're looking for graduate level people who are willing to work as technicians. That's the kind of technician you need. And I really kind of worry that pharmacy is aiming too low if they think that your person off the street that's coming in and doing a 3-month course that you can do in 1 month is at the same qualification level as a technician with experience who's been trained by a good pharmacist who can really take real responsibility. So I really worry that we're aiming too low. I can understand why the people around the board with their multiple pharmacies, and they've been talking me out of having pharmacy technicians for the last few years. Now suddenly I'm excited the fact I've actually got pharmacy technicians and they could be useful. And speaking to one of my pharmacy technicians today, she was excited by it. And now we're saying, oh, well, actually, we don't really need you. We're just going to aim at the bottom again. I'm really not very happy with that. But I mean, I might be persuadable. It could be you're saying put all the rules in place and maybe it can still work. But I just kind of, worry about it. So I think we need to recruit a sort of middle level of people in pharmacy who are getting paid well. It's sort of NHS grade 6, in the 30s of thousands. And those people will take real responsibility. They can be doing vaccines. They can be doing PGD consultations with appropriate patient groups. Whereas some in our pharmacies and in other pharmacies, I see where they're recruiting people that just apply for a job on the street and they're getting paid minimum wage or a little bit more. And it's just not, I don't think we're aiming high enough. I just worry that it's undervaluing the whole service. So. And when I go to the Netherlands, I went to the Netherlands and saw the quality of service that there was there, and it was driven by the pharmacy technicians, and the pharmacists were supervised exactly what we need, where they were just supervising the prescriptions and the quality of the clinical care, but it was being driven by the pharmacy technicians. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
Sure. So I actually wonder whether before going anywhere, our pharmacy technician colleagues are absolutely needed, and you're absolutely right. We do not, they're not utilised well enough. They're not able to use all that wonderful training that they've gone through to its fullest, and we want to see them able to do that. So our response actually in saying, so what's happened here is, if you go right into the detail, which we've not necessarily had time to do this evening, the proposal is to allow the authorisation of a pharmacy technician to either do or supervise others doing, and they've broken effectively the whole of dispensing and selling medicines into 5 elements. I'm waiting until I get this right: preparation, assembly, dispensing, sale and supply. We are saying that these 3, the preparation, assembly and dispensing, can actually be done with safe systems, and pharmacy technicians will absolutely be a part of that and may well supervise if you want them to, but it's not, we're saying it's not absolutely necessary. And actually what we'll end up with in the long term is pharmacy technicians feeling as chained to the technical supply element and the bench as pharmacists feel just now. And actually what we've said is that the part that we hadn't thought about that the DHSC would think have actually got right is allow that authorisation for supervising the stuff that they're really trained for, which is the sale and supply of medicines, clearly up to a point, and we all need to understand all of our own professional limitations, just as pharmacists do, just as our healthcare assistants do, but there is absolutely a huge amount of space there, and that's where the pharmacy technicians will be, and I really hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway, that's where we can have pharmacy technicians working to the top of their licence and really adding value to businesses. And that's that whole kind of PGD space, that kind of overseeing the other sale and supply of medicines to allow the pharmacists to move more into that kind of IP space. So I actually don't disagree with you at all, Torquil, and I hope you haven't taken our consultation as kind of saying, oh, we don't need you guys for this, but it's actually that we value you at the top, more at the top end of the operations and the higher risk end in that spectrum of the supply element of the business. And so that's what we're kind of saying there. And I think as well, if you go back to a previous consultation just a couple of months ago on should pharmacy technicians be able to operate under PGD, we were like, yes, 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 and some more yeses, thanks very much, because it is absolutely within the wheelhouse of a pharmacy technician to do that with the right support, education and training. Their initial education and training is far beyond that which other people in the whole of the health service have, and they're operating under PGDs. And we've even gone further in the very, there's some kind of, there's some parts of this consultation that we haven't covered tonight that are, God, what's the word? Almost like add-ons, accessory bits that the questions that they've asked. And one of the questions they've asked is, what else should we look at next? And in that, we've actually pinpointed and said, do you know what else? It's not, we haven't gone far enough in terms of the operating under PGD. We need to look at being able to delegate under a PGD, because at the moment you can't delegate anything under a PGD. The person that's authorised to do it is the only person that can do it start to finish by the letter of the law. And we're saying actually both pharmacists and pharmacy technicians in the fullness of time should be able to delegate parts of a PGD process that don't require their specific skill set. So the actual jabbing somebody in the arm at the end of a PGD, anyone can do that with the right training. Likewise, some of the data collection, not the consultation, but some of the data collection part can be done at the front end by anyone. So I don't know, Torquil, does that kind of clear things up a little bit? Because I'm categorical. I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, I think that definitely reassures me a bit, because I just think about me and particularly in the busiest pharmacies, is we're still just running them with one pharmacist, but with several checkers. But one thing that's really taking our time now is all the pharmacy first and the counter prescribing. And often it's for, it's for a fungal infection repeated, and it, one of the counter staff can do it. But the problem is that the patients are coming in asking for the pharmacist, because that's what they see as the person with the expertise. So we need to spread that into more people with expertise and seem to have the expertise, not just that they don't already have it, but actually kind of almost legally have it to be able to.
You're absolutely right. It's that profile raising piece, and you can only really do that in practice by getting people doing the new things, and as you say, seem to be doing the new things and actually helping people, and then it spreads with word of mouth. So totally agree with you, Torquil. Hopefully that's been helpful. I'm going to go now to Jonathan. You were the first question in the chat that I can see anyway. So you're asking, in our view, will the changes increase or decrease clinical risk in the short, medium and long term? Well, geez, that's technically 6 questions, Jonathan, you're having a laugh there. So I believe that actually our position is that this should be enabling changes in primary legislation. We still have another 4 layers of clinical governance, and we're actually saying that we need to strengthen the part that says it's the superintendent's job to make sure that, superintendent and owner's job to make sure that the conditions within that pharmacy premises are such that they are safe. All the trainings, the people that are in place, the dynamics that are in place are all safe to enable some of this different way of working to happen. And we're also seeing that actually there's certain gateways that a prescription can't get by until there's pharmacist involvement. So I don't actually think it does. And we're also saying, I think it should be clear as well, that only those businesses that are absolutely certain that they can move to this type of way of working, of which some are kind of close to anyway, would be moving, and we would learn from them, and then others would move as they got the right conditions in place too. So given that there's still so much governance, or there'd still be so much governance around about it, and it's a bit of a shame actually. We had anticipated that the GPHC's consultation on what are the roles and responsibilities of superintendent and RP, we thought that would come before the supervision, and it would have made a lot more sense, actually made it easier for others to maybe take the position we've taken, but that's just not the way that it's come out. So yeah, I don't think that we will see the clinical risk increase there because of the way that we are proposing it goes. I think the kind of sales supply end, it would be on the profession to make sure that we support our pharmacy technician colleagues with the right education, training, and sort of almost managerial and supervisory skills that they need to kind of undertake those roles. And only when we've done that can we move them into a space of overseeing and supervising. So perfectly, I'm reasonably comfortable with that as well. No change comes without risk. I think the risk of doing nothing is far greater, because we will just have, as Torkel's kind of already said, highly skilled people who could be doing other value adding things and taking care of a community better, will always have that link back to sometimes physically a place in the pharmacy in particular roles, and that's just stifling in terms of innovation and moving forward with how we do things. We've also got Craig coming in. Funding issue, it's always got to be raised. More responsibility demands quite rightly so for higher wages. So again, Craig, it's probably one of those individual business decision things, and I think that will be something that flows down into the conversation. What we're dealing with just now and today is around about the legislation, and if that doesn't get changed in the right way, then we're jammed and we're stuck operating the way we are. Accepting that if it does go through as it's written, then we will have the opportunity for pharmacy technicians to be able to step into these new roles, and it's for each individual business to decide whether or not that's something that they are looking to do, and it'll it'll depend entirely on what your business model and makeup is as to whether that makes sense for you or not, and that's something that we can't answer here in terms of a policy position. But you're absolutely right. More responsibility, better remuneration is the way that it should go, and that's something we would wrap up in the round of our kind of negotiations in terms of here are the changes in the market government that we are seeing in order to deliver the services you are asking us to deliver efficiently and effectively. So yeah, it doesn't go unnoticed, that's for sure. I'm not seeing any other hands or questions in the chat. We've still got a good bit of space and time, folks. We had a couple of questions come in before the event. Leslie, I don't know if you're on the call and you maybe want to share. I can't actually see from you. If you are, Leslie, it might be helpful for you to maybe share some of the questions you chucked into us, and we can have a wee chat around them. You are. Are you able to come in then?
Leslie's posted in the chat.
Oh, grand, right, okay. Well, so yes, Great addition. So Leslie come to us as well around about a question over, just correct me if I get this wrong, Leslie, but supervision versus delegation versus authorisation, and wasn't this all getting very complicated? And thanks, Leslie, as well. A question as well around about pharmacist versus RP, which is an important one too. So if I take that one first, because it's probably more straightforward, we have taken our response and our reading of the proposed changes to be RP throughout wherever it says pharmacist. That remains to be seen, but what the consultation is clear in saying is that the proposed changes won't be enacted until the GPHC has done its consultation and proposed changes for the roles of RP and superintendent and whatnot, and then embedded them, and then we'll look to change and move to this kind of introducing potentially authorisation. I would expect it would be RP, because there's already enough questions around about how you would start and end authorisation with the RP having the total oversight without complicating it with another pharmacist bouncing about in there. Now I'm sure there'll be alternative views on that as well. But yeah, we've taken it as read that it's RP for just now. I'll cover the other question, and I can see that Ashkar's coming in as well. So the other question that Leslie brought us was around about authorisation, supervision and delegation. All a bit confusing, and Leslie's absolutely right. We were tied in knots when we first read through the consultation. It was not straightforward. I think the way to kind of describe it, if it helps your reading of it or understanding, would be so supervision we know and are comfortable with, we think reasonably. Effectively, you're there, and whilst you're not sort of bent over everybody doing listening to all their conversations and watching all the dispensing that they're doing, you're available. And you've got a good eye on the SOPs and the running of the pharmacy. Delegation, then, I would kind of see as a very general. A delegation could be me asking you to label something, Sarah, because I'm just not in a place to do that at the moment, or to hand out this prescription or whatever. And that would generally be for something that you could choose to do yourself legally, perfectly reasonable. So it could be that you could have jumped on the PMR before I'd asked you to label something, or taken an already bagged up prescription because I'm already signed in. Let's say I'm the RP in this situation, and gone and handed it out. I'm just delegating something, asking you to do something at a point in time specifically. Authorization takes us to a new place where we're saying, actually, I am handing you the ability to do something, and I'm almost making it legal for you to do something that it wouldn't otherwise be. So I would, in that situation, authorise, let's say, Robbie, if Robbie's a pharmacy technician, to supervise the sale and supply of medicines. He couldn't take that on off his own back. He couldn't decide if I had, as say again, I'm the RP in this situation, if I'd gone out of the building from a lunch, if he starts kind of supervising the sale and supply of medicines and flinging bagged up prescriptions out the door in today's world, then I'm sorry, but he'll probably be losing his registration, and I'll not be very happy about it. That's the difference. There's this new authorization as a new mechanism, and it makes the wouldn't be legal within set constraints. So we've got that. Unless there's also an addendum to that, therefore it can be any pharmacist that can authorise, i.e. someone sitting in the head office. Yeah, so absolutely it's about the RP as we read it in the premises, and not just any pharmacist. Now, yeah. Ashka, you have had your hand up for a good wee while. Thank you for being, I've raised my own hand, how to manage that. You've been very patient. Ashka, if you want to come in with your question, we'll see between Sarah and I if we can answer it. I don't have any sound. If you try again, Ashka, maybe. Oh, how unfortunate, the sound isn't coming through for you. Perhaps if you could type it into the chat, that would be really helpful. If it's a brief enough question and you're not writing War and Peace, that'd be great. And as you're doing that, we'll go to this room, see if there's any other hands up. Apologies, folks, team seems to be against us today, not looking for us to succeed. Stop moving hand up again. Jeez. as well, while Asker's typing into the chat, anybody else got any sort of questions, observations, thoughts, anything at all around about it? I think really for us, we're probably now moving to the part of the evening where we're saying your say is very important as well. Us putting in a response to the DHSC will be one of many hundreds, I am sure, that will go in to agree or disagree with what's being proposed. So we do need good numbers going in to give opinions. They may well agree with ours, they may not. Hopefully you have seen some sense in the logic we've kind of put forward to you tonight. We just believe it's too fragile a proposal, particularly Proposal 1, as it's written anyway, and we're looking for a bit more flexibility there. We'll carry on our engagement efforts with DHSC, with all the other people that we talk with day to day, but we do need as many people as possible who agree with us to chip in a response. Robbie has put in the chat already a wee link as to where you can see our response and where you can see where you can put your own response in if you are so minded. So feel free to go there. There are also explainers. So Sarah has done a video that you can catch on our socials, and we've got some news articles as well in recent newsletters and on the website that you can read in a little bit more detail too. I've got Ashka trying to come through.
I was just going to quickly say, Adam, sorry to interrupt, just whilst you're on that line of information, and the closing date, if people aren't aware, for the consultation is the 29th of February, so all responses need to be in before then, so make sure you've got that pinned in your diaries and you have got all your insights and opinions into the consultation by that point.
Wonderful, thank you. Just as well put someone who does detail on the call now. Ashka, I see you've come in on a different device or account. Let's go for it. Can we hear you? Oh, no. Oh, going to the chat. Let's see. Is that in there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, we can now. Fantastic. There we go.
All right, sorry, I've got IT problems here. It's been a very interesting discussion. I had this view way back in 1997, going back 30 years. Some of the older members maybe remember. I wrote a poem about the future of pharmacy. But essentially, my sort of overall view was maybe a way forward might be like the optician's model, where you have dispensing opticians and you have ophthalmic opticians or optometrists. So essentially that the dispensing opticians would be like dispensing technicians managing dispensaries, and the ophthalmic opticians, optometrists being the pharmacists doing all the clinical role. So you could have pharmacy technicians being earning a huge amount of money, well, significantly higher, and bring them back from primary care into community pharmacy, and give them responsibility with checks and balances, and they can run dispensaries. And community pharmacists who are IPs can do all the clinical roles. But the key thing is that you must have an RP or community pharmacist linked to the premises. So you need both. What we don't really want to do is have the dispensing function disengaged with the clinical function, and that would keep the community pharmacy as a key premises where both can take place. So the dispensing, the technicians do everything about dispensing, and the pharmacist do all the clinical roles.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Couldn't put it better.
That was mooted for me. That idea came about 30 years ago, actually.
Yes.
On a plane coming back from the NPA, from the RPS way down south, representing community pharmacists in Scotland.
And I'd love to see that poem at some point. Actually, you'll have to send it across to us.
I know it's a bit radical, but it's a different way of thinking.
No, and it's the way to go. And I think as well, it's how many are pretty much near to practicing anyway now. And I think for us as well, you're absolutely right in terms of keeping that. The supply function, we are very clear, has to stay within the bricks and mortar pharmacy premises, because that's the hook that brings people in. We always say exactly. You can avoid your GP as long as you want. You can avoid your asthma nurse as long as you want, but you can't avoid going and picking up your Ventolins, of which you're maybe having too many. So yeah, absolutely categorically correct.
As long as checks and balances are in place and the link is still there, that's the key for me. But we need to get our technicians back from primary care and hospitals where we've lost them all virtually in our businesses. We want to bring them back, pay them more, but give them more responsibility.
Indeed, fantastic. Okay, we've got another couple of comments in the chat before we let you all away to your well-deserved evening of peace. I will pick up, so Sarah, if you wouldn't mind picking up John's, what I'll do is I'll get Torquil first. So Torquil is asking us, if this involves primary legislation, what are the likely time frames? So we don't need Scottish legislation, this is all reserved. Once it goes through in terms of UK, it will apply to the whole of the UK. What we'll say though is that it will, as I said a wee bit earlier, it's got some kind of clauses in it that say that won't come into effect until such time as the GPHC have run their superintendent and RP consultations, decided their new regulations and standards about those roles. And then also have had something to say in terms, because they'll also probably add a layer, they'll probably pad out some of the detail around about this to actually tell us how they think it will look in practice and answer some of the questions of, is it RP, is it not, how does authorisation start, how does our authorisation end, all that kind of part will come through GPHC. So it's difficult to say in terms of timescales. We're still probably talking a good couple of years would be my sense on it. Torquil, but at least it's not going to have to go through multiple parliaments. Once it's gone through, it's just a matter of then the GPHC moving. And to be fair, they have become pretty slick in terms of their cycle of build consultation, engage, put it out, analyse, make changes, and then engage to spread the word. They've got a whole machine internally that does that pretty well. So yeah, I don't think too long. John's asking us whether we'd classify the experienced dispenser the same as a newly qualified technician. Legally, they do the same thing. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to pick that one up for us, please.
Yeah. So with regards to this, obviously we need to remember that a qualified technician is still subject to the GPHC's revalidation framework and programme. So although in practice at the moment their day-to-day jobs and duties can look the same and be the same, they do, pharmacy technicians do still have the requirement to undertake annual CPD and revalidation. So I think that's a really important point, because as the role develops, that requirement should hopefully harness more and more clinical skills and knowledge within the pharmacy technicians' remit, which will allow them to hopefully have more and more knowledge that they can then apply to the additional functions that we're hoping they're going to be able to undertake, like what we were saying before, with more active roles within PGD services and whatnot. So although at the minute, yes, on paper it does look quite similar what they do within a dispensary at the moment, hopefully that will change over time.
Absolutely will. And I think that another key difference there is the initial education and training. So I know my comfort would be in a totally different place in terms of asking someone to effectively supervise the sale and supply of medicines. It would be in a totally different place asking a pharmacy technician with all that sort of initial education and training to do that, as opposed to another, yes, very well experienced and well qualified team member. There is a shade of difference there. And I think the key about it is as well, John, to your question, in not very long, legally they will be able to do more than a very well experienced dispenser will, which for that the pharmacy technician profession, albeit for me to speak on their behalf because I'm not a member of that profession, that is a fantastic thing that we're getting differentiation and a bit of sort of a bit more for them to be able to do. It's been far too long in the making. And there's Sarah coming in to kind of give a wee bit of extra depth to that. And then we've got as well Kathy about putting in a comment around about needing funding to pay these techs. So I'll take that back to the conversation we had with Craig's comment a wee bit earlier on, that yeah, absolutely that would require greater remuneration. So John, and again, John coming in, yeah, you've got a dispenser who's more and better knowledge than technicians. There is also the part, I think the DHSC and GPHC in tandem kind of writing these things and coming up with developments. I think they are conscious as well that for public protection, you're probably wanting somebody with a registration that would be on the line effectively, so that they really have something to lose. And not, again, your team, I'm sure, as all pharmacy teams are, very well experienced, very capable, very competent. But in terms of public perception, you really would want someone who is registered effectively with a regulator. So we have just hit 8:01, so I've already broke my promise of letting you away at 8 o'clock on the dot, but it looks like the questions are kind of coming down. Our door is always open on emails, inquiries@cps.scot. You can always ring the office and speak to us. Our mobile numbers are on the tail end of our email signatures if you've had any correspondence from us before. Robbie has popped in the chat there the links for reading our consultation response and being able to respond to the consultation. So that is there. I would encourage you, go have a look and spend the time, get involved. It's been fantastic of you to spend the time this evening. It's been a really good turnout, and hopefully we can turn that into action. And if you need or want, as I say, any further conversation before you kind of commit to doing that, then just come and speak to us. We've spent a good amount of time on it, and we're confident that we've got the right proposal on hand. So thank you everyone for coming along. If you haven't had your tea already, go and grab some and have a nice rest of your evening. I'm sure we'll see you at our next event, which will likely be on, if I'm correct, Robbie, unscheduled care and perhaps Pharmacy First as well. Okay, right. Well, on that, good evening, everyone. Thanks very much and take care.
Thanks, everyone.